Hello, and welcome to the Waves webinar series. Today we're going to be talking about mixing drums with waves, presented by Yoad Nevo. But before we get started, I'm going to take a minute and go through the format of the webinar for anybody that hasn't done one of these before. My name is Yoni and I'm the moderator. You can't see me, but I'm here working behind the scenes to help make sure everything runs smoothly. The webinar will last about an hour and has two parts to it. The first half will be a presentation from Yoad, where he'll show you his approach to mixing drums while going over some of his favorite Waves plugins and how he uses them in a session. The second half of the webinar will be an open Q&A. Feel free to submit any questions you have, and based on how much time there is, we'll try and answer as many of them as we can get to. You can send your questions in at any time, but you won't see them right away in the chat, as they'll first go to me, and then I'll feed them to Yoad one at a time. Keep in mind that there are a lot of people online with us today, so we appreciate your patience as you wait to have your questions answered. I'm going to hand things over now to our presenter for today. He's a London-based producer, mixer, and mastering engineer, and his work can be heard on best-selling, critically acclaimed releases by the likes of Bryan Adams, Jem, Pet Shop Boys, Sugar Babes, and many others. He's also the author of the interactive course, Hit Record, an inside track to music production with Waves, and continues to lend his expertise as a Waves developer. He's one of the best we got, so please welcome Yoad Nevo.
Hi, and thank you for coming, for joining us on this webinar. Today I'll be talking about drum mixing. I have a session here with some live drums recorded. They're recorded very well, so I think it's going to be fun to just see how we can process them in a mix context. Let me just give you a quick blast of what we have here, just a bit of the verse. From this high I can see how deep it could have changed the world. It should have changed the world somehow. Hallelujah, I wish I believed. I wish I believed in you. Okay, so as you can hear, the drum sound is pretty raw. And let me solo just the drum kit so you can hear the drums. Basically, they're just kind of random balance on the faders, no processing, no plugins whatsoever. So let's see how that sounds. Okay, so that's sounding pretty good, but I'm sure we can get it to sound better. The first thing I'm going to start with will obviously be the kick drum, as always, pretty much. And I'm going to use a Waves SSL channel. I'm going to use the E channel rather than the G channel, because I think for the kick drum, actually I'm going to try the E first and then maybe change to the G. So the first thing I'm going to do, let's have a listen to the kick on its own. So you can hear the spill from mainly the snare drum, which we want to gate. So I'm just going to dial in the range to 40 dB of gain reduction. That means that when the gate is closed, there'll be a gain reduction of 40 dB, and I'm going to set it to gate rather than expander. Now I want it to open immediately when the kick hits. So I'm going to change the attack to fast attack, and then I'm just going to dial in the threshold to try to get rid of the snare drum spill. So that kind of does the job. I think we can let more sound go through, so I'm going to lengthen the release time. Just to get more of the body of the actual kick drum. Now we need, as you can, I'm sure hear, we need a lot of bottom end, and I'm going to try to do that with the EQ here on the SSL channel. And that sounds pretty good, but I think that if we insert Renaissance EQ, I think we can get slightly higher resolution on the actual parameters. So what I'm gonna try to do is first of all add something around 60 Hertz maybe. Even higher. Yeah, that sounds good. And then I'm going to try to get rid of some of the muddiness on the kick drum mic. And it sounds to me like that's going to be around 150 or something like that. So as you can hear, it sounds already much open and less kind of tonal. It sounds more I don't know, just it has a nice bottom end, but it's not boomy. You know, it doesn't have that oink, so that's good for us. And now I'm going to go back to the SSL channel and lift up at around 2K or something like that, just to give it more punch. Maybe a little bit higher. Yeah, that sounds cool. That's actually 4K. Okay. And then I think we can add more top end. So for this, since I'm using two EQs, I can you know, pick and choose which one sounds better. So I'm going to try the Renaissance channel, the Renaissance EQ, sorry. That's cool, but I think it's a bit nice. I think I like the kind of grittiness of the SSL channel. That sounds kind of with more attitude. So let's live with that for a while. And now I think we can give it more punch by compressing the kick. So as you can notice, the more I compress, the more makeup gain is added. So the actual volume or level of the kick isn't really changing. If anything, it becomes, you can see that the peak level has risen, and that's because we're allowing the attack. I'm on slow attack here, so we're allowing the attacks to go through, and since we're using the makeup gain, the peak level becomes louder. So I'm going to trim that down on the output. And now we're looking good, and we're sounding pretty good as well. So at this stage we can listen to the snare, see how that sounds. Okay, now since the snare drum has kind of more information in between the backbeat hits, and we want to preserve that as much as possible, I'm going to try to use slightly more gentle gating on the snare drum, and for that I'm going to use the C1 gate. From two reasons. One is that I'm going to have to get rid of the spill mainly from the hi-hat on the snare drum mic. But also, while doing that, I would like to preserve the ghost notes on the snare as much as possible. So the good thing about the C1 gate is that it has basically two thresholds. One is determining the strength of, or the level of the heat to open the gate, and while the gate is open, there's another threshold system that comes into action, which governs the when the gate will close. It sounds a little bit complicated, but it isn't, because you have graphic representation in the form of these two faders. So I'm just going to try to find a sweet spot. Okay, so now I get only the backbeat hits, and again I'm going to set the attack to very fast, and now I can set the other threshold, the gate close threshold, and by playing with these two faders I can get very accurate result. So that sounds pretty good. Let's see. I'm gonna play it on different sections of the song to see if it still holds. Now if I want to allow some of these ghost notes in, I can lift the floor or the gain reduction amount. So by doing that, I'm basically bypassing the gate. So now I'm not doing anything at all. But if I'm lowering the floor by, let's say, 6 dB or something like that, or 8 dB, then I can still hear the hi-hat, but it's not as destructive, sorry, as when it's bypassed. So I get a more definitive sound out of the snare without losing its kind of livelihood. Now, for the snare drum, there's like on the kick, there's basically a one-stop plugin that can just do the trick, and that will be either the SSL channel or the E channel or the G channel plugin. Let's try the G channel just because it's it has more punch on the EQ. Let me just bypass the C1 gate and look at the presets. The main presets on this plugin, on the SSL bundle, and on many more of Waves plugins are actually mine. So let's see what I've done here. And these are the presets that you will all have on the menu because they come as default. So that's kind of a generic preset, and as you can hear, it does the gating, it adds some punch using the EQ, and it compresses a little bit. But I think we can fine-tune it a little bit. So I'll just do a full reset, bypass the gate altogether, and reactivate the C1 gate. And then we can have a listen. Okay, so I'm gonna start by compressing the hell out of the snare, basically, to give it a lot of punch. So there are basically two approaches to compressing a snare drum. One is to leave the attack on slow attack, which allows, as you can hear, it allows the hit and the kind of woodiness of the sound to come through, but at the same time it kind of controls the level of the snare and keeps it kind of more consistent. But the other approach is to use fast attack, and then obviously I'll be compressing much more, so I need to lower or to make the threshold less sensitive. And what that does, maybe a little bit less ratio as well, but what that does is it really kind of sculptures the character of the snare hit, and it makes it very, very even and very manageable. So let's try to stick with it for a while and go for some top. Now you can hear that as I'm adding the high frequencies, I can hear more of the hi-hat spill. So I'm going to lower the gate floor. So now I can hear that I'm kind of cutting the snare a little bit, so I'm gonna add a little bit to the release time. And let's hear that with the kick drum. I think I can gate it even more, so I'm gonna lower the, oh sorry, let me undo that, the gate floor. Yeah, that's nice and punchy. Now what I'm going to add is basically actually listen to first, but then is the bottom snare mic. And here you can, on this you can hear the ghost notes, and they are very important, and by using the gate I did mess them up a little bit. So I have this mic to bring it back to life. So let's see how it sounds. That's pretty good. Now usually I would go and check whether they're in phase, the top snare mic and the bottom snare mic, and here they look pretty much in phase on the front of the hit. There'll be some timing deviations because they're on within different distances from the snare itself, and especially from the snare drum stick. But that's acceptable. But I'm just going to try to reverse the phase to see if that sounds better. I'm just going to use a Q1 EQ just for that. Okay, now you can hear that the snare drum has lost its body, its low frequencies, as opposed to this. And that tells me again that they were in phase. In fact, I don't know why this channel is in stereo. I don't need that. It can be mono. And what I'm going to try to do is to actually bring those ghost notes even more to life. So I'll be using, I'll try to use the Pi compressor for that, because it can be really brutal. So let's load that in. And we want a short decay time. Let's move to... So basically, as you can see, it's compressing the backbeat, so the 2 and the 4. And since I have a short decay time, what that means is that the compressor stops compressing very quickly after the 2 and the 4, effectively raising up the level of the ghost notes, which is what we want. So let's have a listen to that with the kick and the snare. Okay, so now I can control the level. So basically, I have, in fact, a whole fader for the ghost notes. Because again, since I'm compressing the backbeat hits on the bottom snare mic, I'm actually, when I'm mixing it in with the top snare mic, I'm affecting the sound of the actual snare hits very little, and so this becomes more a ghost notes dedicated fader, which is great. So that's very cool. Let's move on to the hi-hat. Okay, I need to get more definition from that hi-hat, but I want to try to get it sounding a little bit, kind of, to add some warmth to the track. So I'm going to try to use the Puig Tech EQ on the hi-hat, and what that allows me to do is to filter some of the low frequencies just with a kind of broader cue, and then I'm going to dial in some very high frequencies. And that has a really nice shine to it. And let's hear that with the drums, with the kick and snare. Sorry, no tom yet. That sounds cool. Maybe a little bit too loud. Now you can hear that it kind of takes over at times, so I'm gonna try to compress it, and I can use the L1 actually with a long release, and that will give it some kind of control. That sounds pretty even, so I'm happy with that. At this point, I would like to try some effects on the snare drum. So let's pick. I want to intentionally pick a chorus bit, because I want to see how the hi-hat will kind of sound in the effect send. So let me set up and auxiliary, and we will just use, let's try Renaissance reverb, mono to stereo. Okay, so as much as that sounds nice, I think that in context it will be much too kind of wet and distant. So I'm going to get rid of the early reflections because they kind of place the snare in a room, and I want to try to avoid that because I have the overhead mics and the room mics in order to do that. So I don't need any more you know, room on the actual snare mic. So I'm going to get rid of the early reflections altogether, and then what I do like about this reverb is the bit that comes right after the snare hit, but I don't need all this tail. So I'm going to gate it with the C1 gate, which is very effective. Now, what happens here is that the gate kind of shimmers, and it doesn't know what to do with this reverb tail, and it will be much more effective if it could get a sidechain from the snare itself, which is much more dynamic, and that's exactly what we're going to do. So I'm going to just give it a sidechain from the snare source, and now it does exactly what we want it to do. Now this kind of gated reverb may sound a bit dated, so I'm going to add some release so the gate will close more naturally. That's nice. And I think we can add a little bit more pre-delay, and what that does is it will allow the source, the snare drum hit, to play on its own, and then the reverb will join it, and that will prevent the snare from sounding kind of too distant, and it will keep its present and punch, and then we'll add the tail to it. And I think if we compress that tail just to control it a little bit more, and I'm going to use the SSL master bus compressor on that. Just on the tail. So I'm compressing it quite a bit, and obviously I need to give it some makeup gain. So as you can hear, what that does to the tail is it makes it much more smooth and dense. So let's hear the kick, the snare and the hat together. Okay, and we'll have to set the balance of the reverb in context, obviously a bit later, in the same way that we're going to have to rebalance the whole thing once we listen to the other instruments in the song. But at this stage, I'm just setting up the mix basically, so things can change quite dramatically later on. As I'm sure you can see with the toms, rather than using gates, I actually edit them or I get them to be beautifully edited, and that allows me to not lose any of the subtleties, because with toms, especially with the rec tom, you'll have a lot of spill from the snare drum, and it's very, very hard to gate in a way that will not, spoil the tom sound, and so if I gate them like that by cutting them basically, and I'm avoiding the cymbal here, so they may be cut too short, but I can just adjust the fade out time, and then I'm gonna add. You see, on something like that feel, there's no way in the world that a gate will be able to take that. So the only way is to use edits here. And I don't even need the snare drum here. Okay, so for the toms, I'm going to try to go with my SSL preset here as a starting point. Let's just tie that in. Let's have a listen. Okay, I don't need the gate, like we said. So I have a bit of compression. I have a bit of brightness here on the high mid and the highs, and I have a little bit of body at around 150 or 160, and like on the kick drum, I'm cutting some of the oinkness of the tom. I don't like that at all. So by cutting it, I leave more space for the top and the bottom, but it sounds still sounds a bit tinny and a bit small. So I'm just gonna add Renaissance and R bass after the Renaissance channel, and that will generate low harmonics, which makes it sound bigger than it actually is. But obviously that's a lot. I'm just gonna add a little bit of that. So that sounds cool. And now I can very easily just copy the same settings to the floor tom. Let's have a listen to how it sounds without any processing. And with. So that's pretty good. Let's hear them both. And now I think we need a nice reverb to make the decay of the toms, which are faded, sound more natural. This one is cut too short anyway. No, I don't want that splash. Let's try something like that, and then just add some reverb. Let's try the IR1. that adds another a nice decay to the snare, but it puts it in a distance, and I want to avoid that, so I'm gonna add some pre-delay. That's nice. And I think that, since you can hear there's some kind of obviously some ringing on the toms, which is nice on the source, but I can avoid that on the IR1 by lowering the resonance on the reverb. So now the reverb sounds more kind of neutral. I can try to add more density. That's not bad. Maybe a little bit less. Something like that. And let's do the same to the floor tom. So that also gives a nice stereo effect, because the floor tom mic is panned to the right, and the reverb is vibrating on both left and right. So that makes it stereo, which is kind of cool. And so we're happy with that. And now we can move on to actually a very, very important ingredient in that drum kit, which is the overhead mics. So that's well recorded, nothing wrong with that, but I'm just gonna check. I like my overheads to not change the metering on the song, and these things accumulate. So if I have some more picking on the right channel, like I have here on one track, like the overhead tracks, and I have other stuff, that maybe the hi-hat and things, eventually I'll have an uneven mix in terms of the left and right, and I want to avoid that. So I want to make the overhead sound as kind of center as possible in terms of their peak level, and as stereo as possible at the same time. And for that we have the S1. So we can see that the snare picks more on the right channel. So I'm going to try to change that. So that seems more even, and that will help the compressor to behave in a more controlled manner as well. Let's try the where are we? The CLA 3A for the overheads. I'm going to compress a lot, so I don't mind that the attack on the compressor is not very fast, but it has a lot of character, and that's what we need for this track. So I like what that does to the cymbals. But like we said before, when you compress something with slow attack, it allows the snare, in this case the snare drum hits, to filter through, thus making them actually louder than they were. And we want to avoid that, so we can use again an L1 to control the snare drum level within the overhead mic. So you see I'm compressing mainly the snare drum hits. The overheads change and make the sound of the drum kit, so they add a lot to how it sounds. So I'm just going to very carefully fade the fader in to find their right level. So you can hear how it sounds kind of dry and sad without the overheads, and the overhead really gives it a lot of sparkle. The snare drum effect, the reverb is very loud, but note at this stage that we can't really bring the auxiliary send down, because that will affect not the gate threshold, because it's sidechained from the snare track, but it will affect the compressor sensitivity. So we have to lower the output level of the compressor, of the reverb, sorry. Okay, let's have a little listen to what we have with the music and see where we're at.
She'll get you there from this high. I can see how deep it could have changed the world.
Okay, something very typical happened here, which is, since we were monitoring only the drums, they actually are quite quiet in the balance. So at this point I can just go and lower the music, which is cheating, but we're dealing with drums now, so don't tell anyone.
Bet you 20 she'll get you there from this high. I can see how deep it could have changed the world. It should have changed the world somehow. Hallelujah, I wish I believed. I wish I believed in you.
Okay, that sounds cool. I think that the overhead mics are a bit too loud, because I'm losing that definition and punch that we seem to have before.
The world. It should have changed the world somehow. Hallelujah, I wish I believed.
That's pretty cool. As often happens when you bring in the bass, the kick drum loses some of its presence. So I think in this case it's just a matter of level, so we can bring it up.
How deep it could have changed the world. It should have changed the world somehow. Hallelujah.
But I also think we can add some more bottom end to the kick drum.
I wish I believed. I wish I believed in you. These games I can't get used to. So long I say I'm moving onwards and upwards, and I haven't even got my boots on yet. And I tried giving up everything that kills me. I didn't like myself. I didn't like my
there's something filtering through the snare, like on top of the snare, which is kind of muddy. And in order for me to find it, I can mute the snare. And I can still hear it, so that tells me that it's not the snare drum. So I suspect it's the overhead. Oh, I beg your pardon, I had the room mics open, so that's what it is. Okay, that's what it is, and that's our next participant in our game here, which adds a lot of ambience, in this case way too much. Okay, so again, the same way as we did with the overheads, we have to control the levels. So although meter wise it looks pretty even, I can hear that there's more snare drum to the left. Let's try to that sounds more even, a little bit more even, although the metering is not quite central, but we'll deal with that by compressing the life out of it. So what shall we use? I think we can try the 1176 or the CLA 76 on Nuke. And please note that on the CLA 76, as on the original piece of gear, the attack faster is more to the right, which is unlike many of the other hardware and software processors. So the default position is here, and we want it faster, and we want fast release as well, so we get that hard pumping effect. And that's something that we can add that has a very dramatic effect on the whole drum kit. So we want, but I can hear there's some ringing at around maybe 200 Hertz or something, which I'm going to try to get rid of. Yeah, it's this fellow here. So that sounds much more clean. Now there's another nice little trick that you can do with the room mics, which is especially if you're recording in a room which isn't massive or very huge, and you're forced to place the mics not far enough from the drum kit, we can just delay them in time, and we can do that either in the host by dialing in some delay, or we can get more creative and do it with the H delay. Let's try to do that. So in order to do that, we want to make sure that there's no feedback, obviously. We're going to put it on all wet, and we're going to put it on milliseconds, and then just have a listen and just dial the delay in as we go. So we can get really creative with that. That sounds, if you hear it without it, it kind of washes the whole drum kit. But if I use the delay, it gives more space and more kind of size to the drum kit. But that's obviously very, very loud. I just want to have a taste of that. Let's hear it with the track. Okay, so I spotted a little bit too much high frequencies on the floor tone. So I'm just gonna filter at around 8K. Use the low pass filter. That's nice. So I think we're pretty much there. There's a nice little trick that we can do with the tambourine. Let's hear it.
Get you there from this high. I can see ideas that could have changed.
So if I now gate it, again using our little friend, the C1 gate, and trigger the gate or sidechain the gate from the snare, I can make it open only on the snare drum.
Change the world. Should have changed the world somehow. Hallelujah, I wish I believed. I wish I believed.
Which is very cool, but I want that only on the reverb feed. So I'm going to move that to an auxiliary return channel, and then so I have the tambourine as it is. I don't think it needs any processing.
Get used to.
And here I have
She'll get you there from this high. I can see ideas that could have changed the world. Should have changed the world.
and here I can just add a reverb after the gated, the triggered gate, and I can use a true verb because it sounds kind of has a nice grittiness to it, so it will be a nice tail. One sec. Where are you? True verb, mono to stereo. Okay. So we can just solo the reverb. Obviously we need to solo the snare drum as well, because that's what triggers the sidechain gate. But we can take it off the bus, so we're not really monitoring it. So now we're hearing only the reverb of the tambourine. And then the true verb has a really nice tail. And again, we don't really need any of the early reflections. So just a nice tail, brighten it up a little bit, make it a little bit shorter, and now we can hear it with the tambourine in context and with the snare and with everything.
Well, I bet you 20 she'll get you there. From this high, I can see our deep sail. Well, I bet you 20 she'll get you there. From this high, I can see our deeds that could have changed the world. Should have changed the world somehow. Hallelujah, I wish I believed. I wish I believed in you. These games I can't get used to.
That sounds cool to me, and I'm happy to answer some questions if you have any. Okay. Okay, to answer the first question from Rohan, I would say that by using the Renaissance, the SSL channel, it's very easy because it only has two settings for the attack, both on the gate and on the compressor, and that makes it kind of easy because you only have two choices. I grew up mixing on SSL desks, and even on my beautiful Neve now, I have only two settings. I have fast and slow on the attack, and once you get used to that, it's actually kind of liberating because you don't have to, you don't have too much choice. It's either squash or kind of punch, and within those two options there's a whole universe of snare and kick sounds. Usually the release time is more flexible, like on the SSL channel, and that I don't think there are any rules. It's just a matter of you know what, I don't even think about it anymore. I've been doing it for so long that I just know how to set the release time to get the sound I want. So I think it's just a matter of experimenting and just mixing. Next one from Phil. And master drum bus processing in place for your mix. Usually I don't really use bus compression on the drums, and that's from the main reason I don't do it. Actually, there are two reasons. One is that I want to try to get the drums sounding good, and I don't want to have any shortcuts. I know that if you throw in a compressor on the drums bus, you can squash it and you can make it sound good, and that's fine. But I find that sometimes it would make the drums sound kind of small, because it will lose the air of the kick drum, and the overheads and all that. And I love playing with the compressors on, on the different elements of the drum kit. And I that's one reason. The other reason is that these days the way I mix is basically I do the mix in the box, but I would split the different channels onto the Neve and use it as a huge summing mixer. So basically I get beautiful sound of the mic preamps when I record, and then I get it again when I mix. But I still have all the benefits from that come with mixing in the box, which is instant recall and all that. And if I would compress the drums, then I would only have two outputs going to the desk, and I would lose a lot of the warmth that going through the fat Neve channels allows me. So there are my two reasons. Would you elaborate on your when it comes to EQ pre-compressor and post? Okay, EQing pre or post compressor. 90% of the time I would EQ after the compressor. I think to me it makes more sense, because I want to get the sound or the dynamics and the character of the instrument, whether it's drums or anything else, even vocals, that I mix, and then I want to dial in the EQ, knowing that I'm only dealing with frequencies here and not dynamics. Because what happens when you put the EQ before the compressor, then every movement that you make on the EQ will reflect on the compression. And although sometimes on bass guitars and sometimes on acoustic guitars, I do like to push the low mid on the EQ into the compressor. Usually I don't do that. Usually I compress first, and then I have much more control, and I can just shape the colors with the EQ without worrying about it changing the threshold or the sensitivity of the compressor. Another one. Choice of compressors. That's a hard one. I would say that again, that comes with, I guess, having compressed so many drums and other instruments. If I had $1 for each dB in gain reduction that I applied over the years, I would be a very, very wealthy man. And that so I kind of know it's like when you play guitar, you know that you would use a Strat for this part and a Les Paul for this part, or something like that. So it's the same. It's your arsenal of tools that you can use, and usually I like the SSL channel on drums, mainly on kick, snare and toms, because it's very ballsy. It has a lot of punch, and it's very kind of in your face. And there are other compressors which are good for vocals and for bass, but would lose some of the impact of kick drum and snare drum. So that would be my kind of first choice. But I would, try different things. I like the Pi compressor as well. But for some reason, maybe because I'm used to mixing on SSLs for so long, that I just dial it in and I know what I'm going to hear, and I'm happy with that. Yeah. Jeez, parallel compression is something that I use. I don't use it as such on drums. I do use it on acoustic guitars and on vocals and on bass, but effectively, sometimes I would split the snare drum, mainly the snare drum, to another channel and treat it differently, and that will involve compression. So in a sense, I would be then using parallel compression, and a lot of the times I would use triggers on the kick and the snare and the toms sometimes. So so that would also qualify as parallel compression in a sense, because you will have, it means that you have two or more different kind of timbres, and each one will have their own dynamic characteristics, and that would, by mixing them in different levels, it will determine the dynamic of the whole of the snare drum, for let's say, as a whole. So that will also kind of that kind of also qualifies as parallel compression or parallel sound shaping rather. So yeah, I guess that covers that. Okay, with the C1, I can get it to sound pretty much like a limiter if I dial in ratio of infinite to 1. I don't think it has. I don't think it goes that far. I think it only goes to 40 to 1, and that would be the most kind of radical compressor. Let's see. 50 to 1, which would probably be enough, but by the time I load up the C1 and set the threshold, set the ratio and set the release time and set the attack time and all that, I might as well just load the limiter that does that, because when I put it like I put it now, after the, like on the overheads after the processing, I want to control the snare drum hits. I want it to do one thing. I have a compressor before, and that's all I wanted to do. I wanted to brick wall the snare drum hits within the overhead mics, and that's what it's for, and that's why it does it so well. So I don't even bother with loading a compressor and trying to make it sound like a limiter. Yeah, basically creating a room, like room mics from scratch. I think that there is kind of a way to do that. If we now mute the room mics and try to treat the overheads mics as room mics, I think that if we just before everything, if we insert an IR1, which would be here, that one, and set it to a studio impulse response, so it needs to wake up the system disk. Okay. Come on. And now we just mix it in. So we keep it on dry, and then we just mix it in. So that sounds kind of like room mics. We can make it a little bit shorter and a little bit more dense, and maybe give it a little bit more mid-range. And then we can compress it even more. So although it doesn't sound exactly like room mics, I think you'll be able to get away with that. And if we compare it to the real room mic, well, it has a lot more compression, but which is something we can, yeah. So I think you'll be able to get away with it sometimes. Yeah, that's a good question, and I would process it the same, but I tend to add more kind of distortion and overdrive and play with it a little bit more when I get program drums or fake drums or superior drums or whatever you want to call them, which basically are program drums which try or which are meant to sound like real drums. So the sounds usually are amazing, and it all sounds great, and it's all mostly well recorded, all those sample libraries and all that. But there'll always be something which will sound kind of rigid and clean. So I would try to put some dirt on it by using distortions and clippers and stuff like that. But otherwise, I think that I will. The starting point will be something like that, and then I will try to play mainly on the overheads. I think that some distortion and stuff helps it to blend better and to sound more real. Another one. Okay, that's I actually never mix on headphones, but for the purpose of this webinar, I wanted to get I didn't want to get any of the speaker sounds to bleed into the microphone, so that's why I'm using headphones. So I'm hoping it sounds good, but it's really hard to mix on headphones. You get like a totally different, not totally, but you get different balance, and it's funny because I find it that the balance would actually sound different between monitors and headphones, but the sound will be okay. But sometimes I would check the mixes on headphones later in the mix, but yeah, I haven't mixed too many times on headphones, and when I did, I always had to go back to speakers and fine tune it. So it's only for the purpose of okay. We can have, I've been told that we have to wrap it up, so thank you so much for joining. This was fun for me and hopefully beneficial for you as well. I'll see you next time. Take care.
All right, that concludes our webinar for today. Thank you, Yoad, and thank you all for taking part. We hope you enjoyed it. Have a great day, and we hope to see you at the next one.